Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a beautiful Saturday morning, Sunday morning, actually. I hope everybody is all set and excited to learn more about your Stanford applications. Okay, all right. We have Rhythm Goel with us, who's already made his way to Stanford. Congratulations on that, Rhythm. And he's going to be walking us through what were his roadmaps, what exactly he did to get into the prestigious university. Even before we get started with that, to set context for everybody, US landscape has a lot of good colleges, and all of these colleges have very rigorous ways that they accept applications. Uh, these colleges could be divided into different tiers. Tier one colleges are one of the most elite colleges on the continent. These are the colleges that have a very, very selective application process and an acceptance rate is a really low acceptance rate of 4 to 7%. You have all of your Ivy Leagues, institutes like MIT and Caltech, University of Pennsylvania. All of these institutions have a very foolproof method when it comes to accepting all of the students that end up applying to their universities. Next up, we have tier two universities who are a little more liberal. Their acceptance rate vary between 10 to 13% on an average. And then to follow up, we have a tier three college, which is a 20 to 30% acceptance rate, more liberal, more open, more accepting, and willing to let people in who are still in their exploration zones. However, all of these universities are looking for some very specific goals and very specific targets. If you think that academics is all they're looking for, maybe not exactly true, because it is not a cutoff system like it is in India. You could have a classroom with a student who has secured a 1550 in the SATs and also a student who has secured a 1430 in the SATs, which means that these admissions become very selective on a very different landscape. They look at a holistic profile. When I talk about a holistic profile, I'm talking about them considering a lot more than just your grades. Along with grades, most of these universities want to look at the overall profile that you have curated, along with that, the extracurriculars that you've taken up, the teacher recommendations or your recommendation letters, letters of recommendation, LORs, very important for these colleges as well. Yes, SATs are not a mandate in the US. However, a lot of universities prefer that you come in with your SAT scores. And of course, essays and supplementals remain a very impactful area, which leads you to get into a university or just miss your chance there. We're going to talk with Rhythm specifically about Stanford today. Our focus of today's talk is completely on how Stanford looks at applications, how his journey into Stanford and different areas of his profile impacted his getting selected. All right. Rhythm, the first set of questions that I have towards your application to Stanford are purely academic. So I want to know, what was your GPA and what were your SAT scores? How did that impact you getting admissions into Stanford?
Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, let's get started. When I in school I did the IGCSE curriculum for my ninth and 10th grade, and I did A levels, which is Cambridge for 11th and 12th grade. My school didn't give us a formal GPA, but in a GCSE I had nine subjects and I had nine A stars, so I had the best scores across all my subjects. And for A levels also I had four subjects and then I had four A's. For the SAT, I took it once. I took it in the summer of 11th grade and I had a 1540, which is a good enough score to help you get your foot in the door, which is what the SAT is meant for. Um, it's not going to make as big a difference if you go from like a 1540 to a 1570. Unless you go to a 1600, it's not worth giving it again. At least that's how I looked at it because my time could be better spent doing other things. Um, so yeah, that was my academics. I also did APs.
Okay.
I took AP exams at different times throughout my high school career. I started out with the computer science exam, computer science A in ninth grade, after ninth grade actually. And that was my first AP. I scored a five. I had five in all my APs, but the APs were particularly helpful for me to gauge the kind of academic rigor these colleges would expect of me, especially top tier ones like Stanford. And it also helped me like sort of compare the kind of rigor and the kind of level we have for example, in India or in Cambridge, compared to what these schools expect of successful applicants. So I started with computer science here because I was always interested in CS. That's what I'm studying here. So it felt the most naturally like right option for me. And then I did Calc BC, which is their high level math AP. And I did that because I was also like I was a big STEM kid, so I did a lot of CS and math and physics in high school. So I naturally felt that I should probably take APs in those subjects. So I did Calc BC, I did computer science A, I did physics C, and then I also did psychology, AP psychology, which is I took it because I was just interested in the subject and my school didn't offer it. So I just wanted to experience learning it, and the best way I thought I could do that was through the AP exam. So that's my test scores, that's my grades. I also took the TOEFL, which is just like a language requirement. Universities require you to take either the IELTS or the TOEFL to prove to them that you're proficient enough to be able to study at these schools. You don't need to worry about like getting a very high score in them as long as you get like above a certain level. And these colleges specify on their website. So Stanford needed more than 105. It scored out of 120, and I got a comfortable 117 without like I the exam. If the exam's tomorrow, I just like looked at a bunch of stuff today, and then yeah, because it's just a very simple exam. Um, but yeah, those are my grades, my academics.
That sounds really a lot that you've put in towards grades and academics. How did you balance preparing for all of these different tests along with your school workload?
That's a good question. One thing before I answer that question, I'd like to emphasize is while it is important, like it is very important for applicants to focus on their academics as much as they need to focus on their extracurriculars because a lot of the times when you're applying to the US, because of how different their admissions process is, applicants forget that you also need to be academically sound. That's your priority before you can like show that you've excelled extracurricularly as well because it's a direct indicator of whether or not you'll be able to survive at these colleges. Um, so that's like my take on the importance of academics. To answer your question about balancing, I think prioritizing what I needed to get done at different stages of my journey and just managing time um, with that helped a lot. I also sort of planned my APs around what I was being taught in school. So when I did calculus BC, for example, I took it after I had been introduced to calc and I'd done like calculus in school. So it significantly reduced the time I needed to like put into actually preparing for the test because I knew the material. I just needed to practice. And then so that helped me with calculus BC. I did computer science A early on because I'd already been like introduced to programming languages early on. I was already making projects and it seemed like I could like study for it very easily. Usually the AP exams they're in May, so they also line up with your final exam prep. Just like with the school year for how it works in India. So that helped. And then for other tasks, I think yeah, just prioritizing and then just like managing time. Okay, you need to get okay if it's your exam season in school, you need to focus on your exams a little. If it's not that important that you focus on school, you can like probably shift to like starting for this SAT or like starting for the AP. Just like making sure it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Time management is a very, very major thing if you are going to do so many different things.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. All right, cool. Now that we know a little bit more about your academics, my next set of questions are towards your profile. Okay. We know that for these colleges, profile evaluation is a very important step, which means that understanding what profiles are remains a very important part as well. So when it comes to profiles, there are a lot of, this is for everybody else. When it comes to profiles, there are a lot of different things that probably go into making your profile a strong one. We've broken that down into a simpler format to understand. When you are applying to colleges, these kind of universities are going to look at what your academic interests are and what direction you've taken, the efforts that you've taken towards that direction, and the way that you demonstrate that you have been holding an interest in this field for a while. Along with that, the achievements that show that you have worked towards your chosen field and you've put in efforts towards it. And one of the most important area remains a launch factor to your profile. It is a way to go above and beyond. It is to show to these universities that you've put in into your area of interest what only 5% of all of the students around the globe have put in. So understanding how you exactly you manage your profile remains a very important task. Okay. Now that we know the importance of building a good profile, rhythm over to you to understand how exactly you built a profile for yourself. What extracurricular activities were you involved in, and which ones do you think stood out for you the most in your application?
Right. Uh, I think deal, as you put it, is a very, very good framework to like sort of give it a structure about how you think about extracurricular activities that you should pursue. In my experience, I always wanted to do a combination of activities that not only showed passion and dedication towards a specific area of interest and like in a specific direction, but also were activities that I enjoyed. I think a lot of times under the pressure of wanting to do extremely well and then wanting to do stellar extracurricular activities that are good enough to get into top schools, students often like waste time um, half-hearting their way through activities that they might not enjoy as much. Right? Everyone can, and not everyone can do a podcast as successfully as someone might be able to, or it's not as easy to do research, for example. But I think it's important to like remember to pick activities that are good enough so you can dedicate significant time and like build them, um, but also to have fun with it. Coming to my activities, I had a combination. So I always wanted my application to have a theme of entrepreneurship, engineering, and design thinking. And so those are three sort of domains or umbrellas that I focus my activities under. And then under these umbrellas, the most common types of activities that you can do is self-initiated projects. You can do research projects, and you can also do internships. So you can probably intern with tech companies. If it's not as easy to find them, but you know, even small roles can show some sort of like dedication and passion, especially at a high school level. Um, so like beginning in ninth grade, I was a CS kid. I was interested in CS, so I just started out with learning a bunch of languages, and then I worked with this one lab, very small lab in my city, where they used to give me coding challenges and you know help me make a few projects. So I learned JavaScript, Python, you know, C, whatever, with them, like the most famous languages, and then I made like a railway registration system or like a travel website. So that's how I started out. And then after I'd done my AP, I found like I had a newfound interest in robotics because of a lot of things. There was like clubs in my high school. You know, I was learning physics, I was learning mechanics, so it interested me, and robotics was like a very clear sort of application of um, CS. So it seemed like a no-brainer. So I was lucky enough to find two mentors in my community. They were professors at different universities. One of them was from Anant National University, which is a design university, and the other was from Nirma University. And so under them, I spent beginning of 10th grade all throughout like high school. I spent considerable amount of time just learning robotics and making projects with them, learning, you know, industrial design, learning how to make um, like how to use microcontrollers, how to use sensors, how to code them up, how to make different things with them. And I made a bunch of mobility robots with them. Um, and then one of those mobility robots I created specifically for COVID because COVID happened during my application season. And so I created a robot that would help with delivering medicine or food or whatever to patients that were isolated in remote wards. And then I sort of debuted it and tested it at a local hospital. Um, and that luckily for me like became successful and garnered a lot of attention from media, from the government. So that was a good project for me. Then that journey like continued, and I continued building my robotic skills. And then by the time I was between 11th and 12th grade, I sort of did like my biggest passion project, in which I worked with again a mental hospital to build like a device to provide assistive technologies to these hospitals so that they can better administer therapy to children with developmental disorders. So I worked closely with the doctor at this hospital and built this bubble tube and completely designed it from scratch, made it extremely affordable, patented the technology. And all of this was under the guidance of these two professors. So they were mentors to me, but like putting in a lot of this was a lot of hard work, like balancing all of this with school and like creating it from scratch. Obviously, it's a lot of mental effort, and I think that's what schools like Stanford look at, like how much dedication and effort you're willing to put in. And that again, luckily for me, worked out. I created an organization around it called Controlled Assistive Technologies, which is like a social startup. I was able to get funding for it, to build my device and supply it to different hospitals, which was sort of my biggest passion project and sort of showed how everything combined into this one activity, which not only had like my robotics and my design skills, but also like my entrepreneurship skills. And then apart from that, I did two other research papers. I had one research on the robot that I built for COVID, and then one um, on autonomous race cars, actually. I'm a big F1 fan, motorsports fan, so I was just naturally motivated to research that. And autonomous racing is a very niche field of autonomous transportation. It's like very up and coming. So I decided to research that on my own, independent research, basic literature review, but again, just something to show passion.
That
Yeah, those were my activities. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's a lot of passion projects that you've worked upon, and congratulations again for getting the patents and the funding for your projects. How did you
thank you.
showcase these experiences as a part of your application? What all went into the application? How did you choose what makes it to your final application process?
Right, that's a good question. Yeah, when you have so much, when you've done so much, it's very difficult to like pick and choose, right? So my strategy was to use like, especially like, for example, in the activities section, you can only list 10 activities out of everything that you've done in high school. So I try to prioritize by importance. So I had my startup at the very top. I had my research after that. I had my internships after that. And then I had my passion projects after that. Um, and there's only so much you can write about them. So you write as much description as you can in those few like 150 characters, I think it is.
Hmm.
Um, but the majority of how I try to convey of the amount of effort I put into these activities was through my essays. Lucky for me, Stanford has 8 supplemental essays along with the Common App essay, which you submit to all different colleges, all colleges. So those 8 essays were enough um, sort of space for me to express how much effort I put into all of these activities, and make it a combination of like my writing skills and like my creativity along with just like expressing how each important each activity was for me. I can't really say which particular essay probably worked for the admissions officer, but I'd like to think that I did a good enough job of creating like a holistic view for the application reader to understand
Hmm.
how I'd spent my time in high school and what all I'd done and to what degree had I done it. So yeah, I think these activities are extremely good fodder for your essays. They give you a lot of stuff to write about. And you can also use the additional information section actually. I did use it. I used it to explain a few things. For example, if I wasn't able to explain very clearly what some of the things that I had done in the activity section meant, then I elaborated on it in my additional information section. You don't want to fill it out, because you don't want to give the application reader more than they have to read.
Yeah.
Um, but I use that space to explain some things a little more in depth. I provided hyperlinks to my resume, um, to like Google Drives, links to like pictures of my projects and like videos and whatever, if the application reader is interested in looking at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I sort of showcased it in my application.
Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, before I move on from profiles, one last question based on your profile. How do you balance depth versus breadth? Did you focus on excelling at a few areas? I see that you have a lot of interest in programming, robotics. You kept your interest there. Or did you choose to participate in many and then decided to come and focus on one area? What was your approach, depth versus breadth?
For depth versus breadth, I think it's important to focus on depth more than breadth. I think it's you run a risk of spreading yourself very thin when you pursue breadth and just try to do a bunch of different things that might not have any connection. It's okay to like vary your application a little by pursuing a couple different things, but they should have a consistent theme. Um, I've always believed, like, whenever I was writing my application, I always believed in showcasing to the admissions officers a consistent theme so that they can understand the motivation behind my activities and they can understand why I did the things that I did, apart from what I explicitly mentioned in my writings. So I do believe it's important to go in depth in a few fields. It also shows like that persistence, that passion, dedication. It also indirectly indicates to application readers why you also might be interested in studying a major, for example. So in my Stanford application, Stanford doesn't bind you by the major that you indicate in your application, but this is true for a lot of other colleges. The major that you select is basically provides the application reader's context of your activities. If you're selecting electrical engineering or CS or mechanical engineering, for example, the application reader is probably going to expect to have activities related to those domains. You know, it's not going to be good for you if you've like had a bunch of debate experience and policy experience and economics experience and you're wanting to study engineering, you know, there's no match, there's no connection over there. So yeah, that's my take on depth. I think depth is definitely more important than breadth. You should probably focus on a few different things and then try to make them as big as you can.
Thank you so much for that insight. For everybody around, depth is more important than breadth. Okay, all right. We see how Rhythm has very beautifully built up his profile towards direction, effort, achievement, and launch. In case if you want to know how you can build better on this, we have a workshop that's happening on 7th of December. Do join in. We will help you understand how you can make your profile better on the deal framework. All right, moving on to some of the most painful parts of US applications, the essays and the supplementals, right? It's very important to have these in the right tone, in the right sense. It's very important to understand why exactly you are putting in the kind of ideations that you're putting in. Rhythm, you mentioned that as a part of your essays and supplementals, you had the chance to elaborate more on your activities. You had the chance to answer a lot because Stanford has like 8 different questions and you have to answer them. Okay. Before I go to Stanford specific questions, I'm going to ask you about your Common App personal statement. What was the central theme of your personal essay, and how did you manage to make it authentic and compelling?
That's a good question. Common App essay was such a task. It is really hard, because you're expected to summarize your personality or like a big part of who you are, and you're supposed to communicate that in 650 words. So it's very difficult to choose something and like talk about it. Um, Again, running with the idea of having a theme, while my activities and my supplemental essays conveyed a um, an academic sort of side of me. I wanted my essays to give the application reader a more personal side of me so that they could get to know me complete as a complete person.
Hmm.
So for my Common App essay, I decided to, and that's usually the deal with Common App essays versus supplemental essays. Supplemental essays are meant for you to be talking more about your activities and your academic ambitions because the questions are literally directed towards those, or they're literally like, why are you choosing the major that you chose, or why did you do the things that you did?
Hmm.
But with the Common App essay, I try to take a very personal approach. I chose the question, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from that experience? And I used this essay prompt to talk about my father and my relationship with my father. Um, Again, another piece of advice. It's it's like a balancing act when you're talking about a family member because you don't want to be coming across, you don't want to be like gaining sympathy from your reader or playing any blame games or just like just like making that family member the focus of your essay. But I use my dad as like an avenue to like not only talk about our relationship but like how growing up with him, like what the impact that had on me, like how he taught me everything that I know. How he was a taskmaster, as a lot of Indian dads are, but like how that helped me. I try to be, creative and funny and just authentic. I think one very important thing that you need to focus on to ensure authenticity is just being true to yourself, true to experiences. I think you cannot have unique ideas. You can only have unique experiences. I bet you anything that you come up with that you think, oh, okay, maybe I'll write about this. If someone else has probably thought about it before, and at the application you just have probably write something similar. So you need to stay true to your experiences and just talk, just find a story worth telling. It's important to not just like tell anything that you want to. You need to be mindful of what you pick to write about, but you want to be authentic and you want to be like real. You want to tell to the admissions officers very proudly, okay, this is me. Um, this is who I am, and if you want me, I guess, yeah, So I think that's for authenticity. But yeah, I talked about my father. It's a little personal, so I can't go into details.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's what my Common App essay was about.
Yeah.
For my
Focused on a
supplemental essay,
specific
sorry.
experience, like your Common App essay. We don't want the details, of course, but it focused on a particular experience, or did you tie multiple aspects together?
Okay, that's a good question. So yeah, again, there are two ways you can approach a Common App essay. It can be a zoom in and zoom in into one particular experience in a very short time frame, or you can like give them a journey.
Hmm.
I went for the journey approach. I started at like I talked about the whole journey, like growing up with him and, from a kid to like being an adult and applying to colleges. So I talked about a whole journey, tied a bunch of things, and showed them different stages of my life through my dad.
That must have been a task. Like editing that and preparing that itself must have been a task.
I
Okay,
know, but I had an amazing time. Writing these essays was the most fun thing.
that's nice to know. I hope that takes away the fear of writing essays from a lot of viewers that we have here. All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now let's talk about the supplementals.
right. For Stanford, as I said, they have a lot of supplements. So again, it takes a lot of time, but they do make it very, very interesting. Stanford gives you like short prompts, and then they challenge your creativity. And then there are like three big essays, which are essays that I said were like give me more room to explain the things that I did and why did I pursue the things that I did. For the short questions, I can quickly go over all the questions. The first one was the most significant challenge that society faces. Again, lots of different approaches you could take with this question, talk about various things. There's no particular strategy. I'd suggest like if especially for people that are interested in applying to Stanford to just be creative with it. Um, I feel like the short answers in general are questions that you are meant to be creative with. So my answer was related to financial literacy. I said the most significant challenge, according to me, that society faces is a lack of financial literacy. This was coming from the perspective of India, and I just want to convey that this is something that I'm interested in, directly or indirectly to the admissions officers. Then the second question was, how did you spend your last two summers? A lot of people I've seen with this question just like list the things they've done. Totally okay. I did the same thing. I sort of listed them, but like I separated phrases with semicolons. So I ensured that I made it a good mix of like serious activities and my summer activities versus like also having fun. So I talked about like doing social work, like a startup, working in space tech, working with children with mental disorders and helping them. And then I also talked about how I like acquired a driver's license, or how I was like big into F1 and how I was cheering my favorite driver, or I was watching cricket, or how I was watching K-dramas and trying to learn Korean because of it, you know, COVID times.
Yeah. We all got sucked
Um,
into that black hole during COVID. I get it.
yeah. So again, I try to make it like a good balance of being serious and also like being lighthearted, so that it shows that I'm also human. I'm not a machine.
Hmm.
Um, then the third question was, what historical moment do you wish you'd witness?
Hmm.
Again, a lot of different things you can pick here. Nothing really strategic about it.
Hmm.
The same goes for this question. Try to be creative. I wanted to convey so far in my application, and like also after this, I didn't really talk a lot about F1, but like I really wanted to convey that I'm a big F1 buff. So I talked about like wanting to be at the meeting where the idea of F1 was sort of established. Not even like the first race or something. Like literally the meeting where the papers were signed for Formula
Wow.
One's contract.
Yeah.
So I
Nice.
talked about that.
That was definitely a historical moment not a lot of people thought about. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. A lot of people would probably talk about, oh, I want to be, I don't know, at the when this king was ruler, or I want to be at this particular treaty signing or something. But it's fun to be like creative with it and make it personal. I know people who talk about stuff like I want to see my grandfather growing up, or I want to spend a day with my grandpa at school, or something like that. You can make it personal like that. Um, but that was my response. The fourth question was elaborate an extracurricular activity, job, or family responsibility that you had. So this is one of those questions which you can use to like go deeper into any of these activities that you think you couldn't talk a lot about. And I used this one to talk about my apprenticeship experience at Apollo Hospital. I was a mentor for apprentices at the hospital, and I realized that throughout the application I didn't just talk much about this activity, and then what I had written in the activity section also probably lacked detail. So I just used this essay to elaborate on that. And the last 50-word question is one thing that I'm looking forward to at Stanford. This is like a why Stanford essay.
Hmm.
A lot of colleges typically have why that college essay. So this is like the unofficial why Stanford essay. Again, you can talk about either wanting to do research with a particular professor or being interested in a specific aspect of Stanford, or you could also talk about traditions at Stanford, because it is one thing that you're looking forward to at Stanford. There's probably a tradition at Stanford that you've heard a lot about, and you can express significance about why you want to experience that tradition. Um, so a bunch of things you can talk about. I sort of talked about multiple things. I talked about wanting to experience the entrepreneurship culture at Stanford because it is one of the most, the biggest things Stanford is known for, Silicon Valley, of course. Um, and then how I want to tie in that experience, that entrepreneurial experience with the global outreach of the international community that Stanford has, and combine that with technical expertise, like in engineering. So I sort of like summarized what my theme going into the application was and what I expected out of Stanford.
Hmm.
Um, so that was my approach, but totally, totally valid to like take any of the other approaches that I talked about before giving my answer. Um, so those were the five short essays. For the long essays, which are 250 words. So these ones were 50 words. Now the ones that I'm going to talk about are 250 words. They're the bigger ones. So the first is intellectual vitality, which is the idea or experience that makes you excited about learning. This is again another um, very typical Stanford essay. They want to understand what excites you about learning, why you are excited to do the things that you did, and what was your motivation behind pursuing something that you probably did. Um, for this essay, it can go a lot of ways. I think a lot of these essays can go a lot of ways, so I just keep saying that. But for this particular essay, I decided to talk about design thinking, which was one of my biggest interests in school. Um, so for design thinking, I use this essay to like talk about one experience that I had sort of in middle school where I unknowingly employed the design thinking process and sort of built a very small like fan out of like circuits, and then you gave it to my mom. So I just used like that I recounted that moment, and I thought, oh, I was unknowingly using the design thinking process and like sort of structuring my creativity, which can sometimes be unbounded. Um, and yeah, that's how I sort of described my design thinking philosophy in this essay. Um, the second long essay is Note to Your Future Roommate. This is again very Stanford essay,
Yeah.
very flagship Stanford essay. This essay I had the most fun writing. I talked about a bunch of things. I talked about being a competitive typist. I talked about Formula One, of course. I talked about a very having a very mixed Spotify playlist, like songs from Arijit Singh to Ed Sheeran. My interest in robotics, like how my room's going to be like messy with the wires and circuits and everything. I talked about food, obviously. I'm Marwadi, so I talked about dal bati churma in my essay. I literally said that. I literally typed out dal bati churma. Um, yeah, and then yeah, just a bunch of things that I basically try to express who I am as a person, what things I like, what it is like living with me. I know I read an essay of a friends who talked about drinking haldi doodh before, like if you're sick, or like having dahi chini before an exam, making it personal like that. Obviously, there are people from like different other countries talk about their traditions. People from Sweden, I know someone from Sweden talked about something which was very Swedish. I don't remember what exactly it was, but yeah. And then I sort of like sprinkled in a few of the research that I'd done on Stanford specific like aspects of living. So I did that through like Reddit and YouTube vlogs or whatever. Um, so I talked about how the engineering center, like doing late nights P-sets at the engineering center, and how like during those P-sets we'll quickly run to Tap, which is like a local cafe here, and it's known for its late night food. We'll go there every week. So this actually came true. When we're like doing late night P-sets, making quick runs to Tap for like much needed waffle fries or something like that. Um, so yeah, that was my roommate essay. Had a lot of fun writing this.
I can see that.
Um,
Show the fun that you had writing that.
Yeah,
All right.
this took the least time in like editing because it was like it just came to me. And the last big essay is about something that is meaningful to me and why. So for this essay, I tried to explain. I kept this essay, so you might have noticed throughout my application so far, I hadn't talked about my passion, like my biggest passion project, which was my bubble tube and my
Mm.
organization that I found around it.
Yeah.
So I kept this last essay for that because the prompt directly says something that is meaningful to me and why is it meaningful to me. So I sort of wanted to explain to admissions that the reason behind why I'd built that bubble tube, or how did I even get to that, and why that particular achievement is very important to me, apart from what obviously it is on paper. So I talked about how the journey began, how I met how I happened to be at this mental hospital because of a school visit, and like how I interacted with these children, and how I found this device that was so important to their therapy, but yet this hospital couldn't afford it. And sort of that helped me. So that sort of sparked something in me, like how I wanted to help these people out with my skills. I found it something to be worthwhile spending time behind, apart from school. Um, and then I just detailed how I worked with the hospital, worked with the um, doctor, try to come up with different iterations. Again, sort of implying that I use the design thinking process in
Mm.
my writing, and how I was successfully able to build a device. And like at the end, when I saw these children so happily interact with it, it like all the pain and the effort that went behind it was like worth it. So that's why it was meaningful to me. So
Wow.
that was my meaningful, like my why something that was meaningful to USA.
Wow. Your essays themselves, I think, portray a lot about who you are as a person and your passions as a whole. So I'm really
Yeah,
impressed by the way that you packaged the entire essays. It's kind of like a really good way to show and sum yourself up to the admissions officer. All right.
right.
Before I move on from the essays, any tips that you would like to share with all the viewers here on how to brainstorm about the essays and how to get the best out of editing them? Any tips that you used probably, or maybe you missed out on using?
Right. For the brainstorming stage, something that I regret doing, because for better or for worse, I've always been a perfectionist. Um, especially when I'm writing, this is the most frustrating thing that I find about myself is when I'm writing, if I don't come up with like something that I'm satisfied with, I'll just like not write it, or like I'll immediately delete it, which is a very bad strategy or idea when you're writing a Common App essay, or like when you're writing something for admissions. Uh, because and I realized this very late in the admission cycle. So it's important for you to like get the wheels spinning, get your ideas flowing. Just put everything that you have in your mind on a Google Doc or on paper, and just get those ideas out. If something doesn't work, just let it sit there. You can go scroll down endlessly in a Google Doc. That's one of the benefits of writing your essays in a Google Doc. And just put your ideas in there, experiment with them, think about different things, think about different ideas that you can, or stories in your life that you can talk about. The prompts do a very good job in helping you helping guide you towards like what to think about. So that was my advice in brainstorming. Just don't be of the mindset that you want to write the perfect essay in the first attempt. That's never going to happen. And it's important to, because even if my essay seems so perfectly strung together, or it seems like everything fits together, it took a lot of effort to get to the stage, and it took constant re-editing and like scrapping ideas. I went through so many different ideas for my Common App essay, and this is true for a lot of people. It might sound like very cliched advice, but this is actually how the process works. It's very frustrating in the moment. Um, Trust me, I wanted to pull my hair out every night. But it is what it is. But I think to make the journey easier, it's important to like just put everything that you have in your mind on paper. It'll help you like process ideas and think about it. For editing, once I had my basic structure, my basic idea down, with editing, it was just like trying to fit it in the word limit, trying to make it sound um, crisp, and trying to make it sound uh nuanced, and like using good language, because you want to be putting your best foot forward. So yeah, I think for editing, I don't really have any other tips. I guess it helps to uh, make others read your essays. Don't go seeking advice from every random person.
Mm.
Just like from a few other people, maybe people you trust, maybe people whose writing skills you trust. You might trust your mom, but you might not trust her writing skills.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, I um had a few people proofread my essays. One of those people was my cousin brother, who's a senior at USC right now, so he was 2 years older to me. Um, so I had him proofread my essays. I had my English teacher read my essay. Obviously, very good resource everyone has, because they usually know how like syntax works and how grammar works, and they're very good at catching those small things apart from just the idea.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think people at Clever Hobby, I guess you can make proofread the essays if you're working with them. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they're very good resources.
Yeah.
So yeah, for editing, that's my tip. Yeah,
Thank you so much for that insight. And yes, absolutely. Mentors who have been excelling at this for a really long time, those are the kind of people who would be one of the best sources to proofread your essays. And yes, we
right.
do have mentors on board for that. Okay. My next set of question will be regarding your letters of recommendation. Who did you choose to write your letters of recommendation, and why was that choice? And how did you ensure that your letters of recommendation were strong, detailed letters that highlighted the right kind of skill sets about you?
Right. So for the letters of recommendation, I decided to go to my math teacher, my physics teacher, my school counselor. I think there's one counselor letter that everyone needs,
Yeah.
and two subject-specific letters. I think Stanford also allows you to put in one extra recommendation letter. So I was debating between my professor, the one who mentored me at Nirma, and um, my English teacher. The reason I say my English teacher is because I had a very, very close bond with her. I was always like a um, naturally motivated reader, and she's like I was into reading, so I was always close to my English teacher, and she also like was like a life mentor for me more than like a teacher. So I thought that she would be able to describe me the best to admissions. And it's important to be picking people that you trust to write good about you and like to write the right things about you, because you can't look at your letters. Or at least for me, I didn't look at my letters, because the Common App makes you sign this um sort of non-disclosure thing where you tell them that you haven't looked at your recommendation letters.
Hmm.
Um, but that's why I picked my English teacher. For math and physics, it was pretty simple because I was interested in an engineering major, or like computer science or math, electrical engineering, which requires a lot of math and CS, and math and physics. So I talked about that. A lot of the CS that I did was like personally motivated rather than at school. So I didn't pick my CS professor for that at school, because I didn't think they would have a lot to say. Um, And my counselor, I just for my counselor, and this you can do by the way to help your teachers out as well. Just give them like a prepare a recommendation letters of recommendation sort of document where you give them bullet points about things you want to be highlighted in that letter, and you can make like a format for it and customize it based on subject. So if it's a physics teacher, you can ask them to talk more about activities that are more related to that subject, and also talk about things that you want them to highlight about your sort of participation in class or how you were as a student or something like that. Um, for the counselor letter, I wanted my counselor to talk about how I was as a kid in school as a whole. So my leadership activities, my how I was with other students, how I was in a community setting. Because when admissions officers are reading these letters, they're looking for proof of what the application or what the applicant claims to have done or claims to be like. So the letters of recommendation are good sources for these people to like verify the things that you tell them. So I asked my recommenders to sort of highlight some activities that I did and um, talk about some of my achievements and how they think they perceive them. And I think lucky for me, they did a good job. So yeah, that's my advice with recommendation letters. So yeah, I had a counselor letter, a physics and a math letter, and an English letter. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's amazing. Okay, all right. If there are questions for us or for Rhythm, you can keep dropping them in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to take a few. One question that I have, Rhythm, is that are you a US citizen and did you apply for financial aid?
No, I am an Indian citizen. I've always lived in India. I grew up there. This is my first time in the US. Um, and for financial aid, I didn't apply for financial aid because Stanford is not um, merit based. It's not need blind, it's need aware. So I felt applying for aid would have lowered my chances. Um, so yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be able to support myself here. But yeah, I didn't apply for financial aid.
All right. Did you apply for the restrictive early applications or was it a regular application?
I did. I applied REA and I got in early.
All right. Congratulations again on that. Um,
Thank you.
what was your basis for choosing Stanford against other colleges? This is another question that I have.
That's a good question. Stanford, um, obviously as a top school is a no-brainer, you know. But a couple of things for me were, as I said, um, primarily academically, Stanford excels in the things that I was interested in pursuing at a college level. So obviously, top-notch academics, top-notch engineering programs, combined with entrepreneurship and just a culture of like venture capital and like startups. Stanford, I think, is a school in the US that has the most startups come out of it. So that was a natural choice. Um, Location wise, it is in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm surrounded by headquarters of some of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah.
They're like 15 minutes away from campus in either in all directions. Um, Plus the community itself is very, very sort of hyper talented. So that was a big appeal for me. I wanted to be in an environment that would challenge me intellectually and help me grow. Um, I was also bit picky about East Coast versus West Coast. You know, if you go to East Coast, the national choice in this specific area would probably be MIT or like Harvard. But I wanted to go to Stanford because of it being on the West Coast, it being a little warmer. California, I always wanted to be in California.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, those were my choices. I think Stanford was a perfect fit for me because it also the kind of students that went here. I tried my best to talk to a couple of people that went here through LinkedIn or through cold outreach. And I got lucky doing that. And what I realized is that the kinds of people that go here are of a similar mindset to what I have in terms of their approach to learning and their approach to like building. And it I thought was an environment that would like give me a lot to excel, give me a lot of opportunities to excel. And another important thing that I sort of wanted was not being bound by a single major because I'm very indecisive.
Hmm.
Although I'd done all these activities and you know sort of seemed to have like a natural interest in CS and robotics, I just didn't want to go in with like a commitment of being tied down to this major. So Stanford allows you to like study whatever you want after you're in.
Yeah.
And although I've stuck to the most part to my plan, there have been a lot of like new things that I've become interested in that has sort of opened up new ways. And that was very important to me. If I was going to a school in the US, which gives you a flexibility to do so compared to India. India has top-notch academics, but it doesn't have as much flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was another big factor for me to choose Stanford.
Okay. All right. That sounds like a fair choice. Another question that I have on the chat box is, and this is something I'm curious about as well. What are your favorite things to do on
Right.
Stanford campus? Not academic related, like except academics, what are your favorite?
Oh, favorite things. Rock climbing. Stanford has a very good rock climbing wall. It's at Fariaga. So there are two gyms at Stanford called Niriaga and Fariaga. Niriaga is closer to where I am, and Fariaga is like a little farther away. Rock climbing is a big one. Hiking. Stanford Dish is a very popular hiking trail. You'll find a lot of sort of billionaires and tech CEOs also here, by the way. A friend of mine ran into Tim Cook when he was hiking at the Dish, which is unbelievable. He was hiking at 5 a.m. and Tim Cook was also there. So he talked to him like one-on-one about Apple's new launch of the iPad, which is wild. Like
Wow.
media reporters and like people in the industry die for such opportunities and interviews. And this guy was just talking to him when they were hiking,
Wow.
um,
Yeah, that's a
which is
great.
insane. I know. So hiking, biking, um, it's very beautiful out here. So just like going into nature, playing a lot of beach volleyball. Oh my God, I play so much beach volleyball. It's amazing. Very California thing. Um, what else do I do? I'm in a couple of clubs. I don't know if that's considered academics or not, but we also have a lot of fun. There's like a makers club, which which recently got popular for making like a remote control, like a motorized couch.
Hmm.
So I'm part of that. I'm part of the entrepreneurship community here, obviously. And we host a bunch of really cool events. We invite VCs and speakers from top industries. We invited the CEO of Y Combinator a couple of times. Um, we invite the founder of Coursera is a professor of mine actually. So he gave a talk which is really cool. And then we also do a bunch of other fun stuff. I took my whole sort of my cohort. So I was responsible. I was like I was leading this team called Engagement, where you organize fun events for the community. And I took my whole sort of cohort Top Golf, which is like a golfing range. So I took everyone to Top Golf. We had a lot of fun there. Um, I go to the beach often with my friends, sometimes during the day, sometimes at 2 in the morning. It's
Oh,
very
wow.
wild and unsafe, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have a lot of fun here. We might seem like machines and like constant work, like powerhouses, but we're like normal humans here. I think the thing about people that go here is just like they're really passionate about what they do. I know that might sound cringy and like very cliche, like what does it mean to be passionate about something? But it's just like having fun with what you're doing, having fun learning and enjoying life and like just like living in the process. So
Yeah.
yeah, we do a bunch of like fun stuff as well.
All right. Okay. That was a nice insight into the campus life at Stanford. It seems like you're enjoying yourself. Please be safe, make safer decisions, but yes, enjoy yourself as much as you can. I
Yeah.
see a lot of questions on the chat box related to profile building. I'm going to drop in a link on the chat box for everyone. Guys, this is a very nice opportunity to register for a one-on-one profile consultation. We could have a specialist evaluate your profile in particular and give you insights on your profile. Go ahead and register. For the first 10 registrations, we are going to have a free one-on-one counseling. So take the opportunity, make those fastest fingers work. All right. Apart from that, thank you very much for the insights, Rhythm. We genuinely understand how long the process is. We understand that there's so much more that happens into applications than just selecting the college and understanding and making up your mind that, yeah, cool, I want to get up one day and go there. There's an entire process that happens. There are profile building areas. There are passion projects that you have to delve into, understand what your SOPs and your supplemental essays have to say, make sure that your LORs are in a place. So many different things that are involved in the process. And it's always a good place to start early on. So I hope that everybody here takes the opportunity to start early and understand what your process looks like. Okay. Stand it out might not be easy, but we are here to help you out through and through your process. Go ahead and click on the link, register with us. By the time that you do that, there are a lot of thank you messages on the chat box for you, Rhythm, as well, for giving us insights on how Stanford works and making us realize that although it takes a lot of effort, it's achievable and it's doable. Thank you for building up our confidences. Thank you for giving us the encouragement to go ahead and follow our dreams and our passions and probably become a member on the Stanford campus and get the chance to meet you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Thank
Yes.
you so much for that. Yeah, I'm always happy to share my journey and my insights because I feel like it's a very difficult journey. I navigated a lot of it on my own. So I'm always happy to help. I hope the best, and I wish everyone on this call the best in their application journeys. You have resources like Clever Harvey at your disposal, so make the best use of them as you can. And yeah, just good luck. And I hope to see as many a few as I can at Stanford someday.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rhythm. Thank you. If they do make it to Stanford, we'll make sure that they hunt you down. All right, cool.
Perfect.
Happy tracking. Happy weekend. Have a great time. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Bye bye.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody else, if you've registered, thank you very much. If you're still registering, if you have questions, I'm right here to answer questions if you have any. If not, thank you very much for being here on this lovely Sunday morning. Have a great weekend ahead of you. Yes, absolutely. I can send the link to you again. I've posted the link in the chat box again for those who want to register.